Welcome back, sewing friends. My name is Annette and I'm sewing in Michigan. I hope this finds you well. I have been out of town for a few days, which I will tell you about in my next video. So that is why I've been a little delayed in posting on the channel. We're having a heat wave right now, so I have the air conditioning turned off while I record this. But since I'm doing this Q&A format, hopefully if it gets too hot in here, I can turn it back on for a little while. Today's video is something a little different. I wrote down 20 sewing questions, and I would like to share those with you. So I'm going to talk about each question in turn. I'll give you the question. I'll tell you what my answer is. I would love it if you would answer these too, if you would make a video like this, and if you would tag me, that would be fantastic. If not, I hope you enjoy hearing my responses to these sewing questions, and it gives you an opportunity to think about what your own responses would be. So let's get started. How do you feel about using a new pattern? For me, I like to use the tried and true patterns. I'm reluctant to try a new pattern. When I have a pattern I've used repeatedly that I know fits me well, or that I've made adjustments to in the past to make it fit, such as this one I'm wearing, the Arnold blouse. I know I've made so many of these, but I make an adjustment to the dart and to the length of the blouse, and I know I can just cut it out and sew it up and it will fit me just right. That is a comfort place for me. I'm not one who would look through pattern catalogs in the store or look at patterns online and say, oh, I'll take one of these and one of these and one of these. I'm always looking at the picture on the pattern envelope with skepticism. Will that fit me properly? Can I make it fit me properly? Will that be flattering on me? Because it's very disappointing to spend the time and effort to make something and not like the way it turns out. So I have to challenge myself to use a new pattern. I'm about to print out the chalk and notch fringe dress pattern because I have a specific piece of material I would like to make that from, and that is my next challenge for myself. I might make a toile of the bodice so I can be more sure about the fit before I cut into my fabric. But I like the tried and true. I have a pattern, I think it's a Simplicity, for a raglan sleeve sweatshirt that I've made over and over and over again. So that's kind of my comfort place for sewing. It's a challenge for me to use an unfamiliar pattern. Do you remake or mend old makes? I've seen a lot of people on their vlogs talking about how they want to alter something or repurpose an old garment. It is challenging when you have, say, a dress that you made that has a lot of fabric in it, but it doesn't suit you anymore for whatever reason. It doesn't fit, or you don't like the style. And I often think, well, what could I do with that? Is there enough fabric in the skirt to make it into a top or something like that? So I'm curious, do you remend or repurpose your old makes? How do you deal with things in your wardrobe that are me-made that maybe are not suiting you anymore? Do you make toiles or mock-ups, practice garments? How do you feel about that? I don't do it very often. I often treat the first garment I make from a new pattern as the toile, expecting that I might have to make some changes, adjustments, alterations to it. I will do a toile if it is precious fabric I would be cutting into for the main garment, and I want to make sure I get the fit right before I cut into that fabric. But otherwise, I don't do this, but I'm curious how you feel about toiles and mock-ups. What kind of fabric do you use, and do you try to make a wearable toile, or do you plan on disposing of the fabric later? I have a couple of old bed sheets that are cut up from previous projects that I usually use when it comes to making a mock-up. What do you do? Do you pre-wash your fabric? Everybody says you should, and I do, because I use a lot of natural fiber fabrics, and I'm always concerned about shrinkage if I don't pre-wash it. I'd rather pre-wash it and take the time and the effort to wash, dry, and iron it before I cut into it than to make something and then be disappointed with shrinkage later. Now, that said, it is frustrating sometimes because if I do come home from the store with a new piece of fabric and I know exactly what I want to do with it, I would like to start sewing right away. And that extra step of washing, drying, and ironing it does take some time and slows me down, but I try to remind myself that I'll probably be grateful I did it in the long run because they're natural fibers. But I'm curious what you do. Some people say it's an absolute rule to pre-wash your fabric. Others say it doesn't really matter that much. What do you think? Do you finish your seams? And if so, how? Now, this is another one of those sewing rules where some people say you absolutely must finish your seams. You absolutely must own a serger or overlocker. Some people who don't own those kind of machines, and I'm one of them, say that you should cut your pattern out with pinking shears, or you should zigzag your seams, or you should do French seams. There's all kinds of ways to finish your seams. I don't. I'm here to confess that I don't. I just press them open and carry on because that is how I was taught to sew, and I've never had it cause me problems. Yes, there can be a little bit of fraying on the seam material, but not bad, not to the point where I feel like the garment is in jeopardy of ripping or something like that. It's just not something I do. Now, my sewing machine, as you know, is an ancient Singer sewing machine. It was my mother's. I think it's 1957, circa 1957. And all it does basically is sew forward and backward. It doesn't have any special stitches on it. You need special attachments and special feet to make it do anything other than straight stitching. And I do have a buttonholer that I have to attach and screw on and that kind of thing. I do have a more modern machine. I have a Brother machine that I bought during the pandemic when I didn't have access to my old Singer. And I don't love it. It does all the stitches and everything, but I just don't love it. So for me, for the kind of sewing I do, I don't really care about the whole finishing seams thing. Now, I know some people are going to tell me, oh, that's terrible. As far as a serger or overlocker goes, maybe one day I will buy one. Right now, I just don't want to go to the expense or bother. And learning how to use it and learning how to thread it and all of that just kind of seems like an ordeal to me. But I know you might feel very strongly in a different way. So, do you finish your seams? And if so, what is your favorite method of doing so? What is your favorite sewing task or activity? I love the initial stages of cutting out and ironing on interfacing and doing those initial shoulder seams and things like that, where I can actually see the garment taking shape under my eyes. I actually like doing darts because I have a way of doing them, again, that my mama taught me that works very well for me. I know a lot of people don't like darts. Don't like doing darts, but I enjoy it. I just enjoy all those tasks that make the garment take shape. So let me know, what is your favorite sewing task or activity? Is it buttonholes? Is it zippers? Is it hemming? Is it putting on the final garment at the end and finding that it fits perfectly and looks beautiful? What is your favorite part of sewing? And with that answered, we have to ask the corresponding question, right? The sister question. What is your least favorite sewing task or activity? Seam ripping is one of mine. I try to remember what Grandma told me, that half of sewing is tearing out and doing over. But it's frustrating when you realize you've done something wrong and you have to redo it. I don't love hand sewing. My mom taught me to hand sew all hems. She always did like a blind hand stitch for hems, which meant that she would hem the bottom of the garment, the bottom of the sleeves, all those kind of things. If there was a neckline facing, anything like that, she would always hand sew it down, because in her opinion, that made the garment look more professionally made. I hate hand sewing. I do it for buttons, obviously. I know you can machine sew buttons on too. If it's like a 2-hole button, there's a way to like zigzag to sew that on. Again, my machine doesn't have a zigzag, and I don't mind sewing on buttons by hand, but I don't want to do all that hand sewing when it comes to hems and things like that. I just do a machine hem, and I don't think it matters or that people notice it. If you're using a thread that's a good match for your garment, it doesn't really show that much. And we're all used to machine sewn hems on ready to wear garments. I guess unless it's couture, but most of us can't afford clothes like that. So I don't like to hand finish things. What do you think? Do you reach for stash fabric first, or do you buy new? I am trying to curb my desire to buy new. I'm trying to sew down my stash, and I have used quite a few stash pieces recently. I'm also working on, that I sew for charity for little dresses for Africa, and I've made quite a few just this week. I have a lot of printed cottons in my sewing stash, and I am using those to sew up little dresses. So I can both bust my stash and clothe a little girl somewhere. So that seems to me a good and productive use. I have to be very careful every time I go into Fields Fabrics. I want to buy everything I see. So I'm trying to condition myself to go to my stash first. I'm also trying to sort my stash a little better so I know which pieces of fabric are 2-yard cuts or 3-yard cuts, which are dress cuts as opposed to enough for a top or something like that. That makes it easier for me to reach into my stash. I have my stash fabric in plastic tubs and sorted by length and type and things like that, but they do get mixed up after a while, and I try to resort them. It's helpful to me also to revisit my stash from time to time, just to shuffle through it and see what's there, so that I know when I go to the store what I have, because I have been known to buy the same fabric more than once, not remembering that I already have it. So as a way of kind of curbing the stash explosion, I try to look to my stash first, but buying new is so much fun too. What about you? Do you buy intentionally and only one piece at a time, or do you look to your stash when you want to make something? Now we have the age-old question, are pockets essential? And you'll find that most people are either very strongly pocket people or anti-pocket people, or some people are indifferent. I love pockets in my clothes. I put side seam pockets in my skirts and dresses whenever possible. I don't make pants, but I love having side seam pockets. I will add them if they are not already there. The fact that women's garments, the ready-to-wear kind, are often made without pockets is a topic of frustration for a lot of people. I guess in years gone by, there was the philosophy that women would always wear a purse, or that we shouldn't be carrying anything, or we could carry a little clutch with just a key and a lipstick in it. I carry a big purse, but I want pockets too. I think part of the reasoning for not including pockets in women's garments is that it would ruin the line, or that it would bulk up the hip area so that it's more slenderizing to not have pockets. I guess it depends on the fit of the garment and the amount of bulk it would add. I usually put them in full skirts and dresses, gathered skirts, so it doesn't add bulk. But I have seen people on YouTube making very fitted or slender dresses where the pockets do make the hips look big, or they stick out on the sides. So I guess it depends. Or there's also patch pockets as an option. What do you think? Are pockets essential, and will you add them to a garment if they don't come with it? Now, if you do want to add pockets to a garment that they don't come with, I do have a pocket tutorial here on the channel that'll show you how to do that. Do you prefer sewing with knits or wovens? I would say mostly wovens for me, but it kind of depends on the garment. Now, I learned to sew with wovens, so that's my comfort place. And I think many of us, when we are new sewists, we tend to go for the cottons because they're very stable. They don't stretch and wiggle and bend and slip. So it can be more comfortable where, we know we pin the garment together, we sew it, and it's not going to shift around. I am still getting used to sewing with rayons. I don't mind sewing with synthetic fabrics as long as they're stable synthetic fabrics like a polyester, that doesn't move around a lot. It's pretty similar to a cotton in the way it stays in place. I don't mind that. So I'm evolving on this journey. I had not sewn with knits pretty much at all until recently when I made that little t-shirt with the panda bears on it. That's a cotton jersey knit. And I was pleasantly surprised at how easy it was to sew with and how the seams, they don't fray or they don't need finishing. So I think I will be sewing with more knits in the future. It was a challenge to keep everything flat when I cut it and to make sure I wasn't stretching things as I sewed, but it was really easy to do. So I think I will be practicing more with knits in the future, but wovens are my go-to. When it comes to fasteners on clothes, what are your favorite fasteners, or do you prefer no fasteners at all? Now, this little top I'm wearing is just an over-the-head kind of thing. I've made a lot of over-the-head tops and dresses, or ones with a tie neck, like a bias binding, usually a self-bias with a bow tie in the front or in the back. Because fasteners can be challenging. I'm getting better at buttons and buttonholes, so I'm doing more and more of those. I'm not crazy about zippers. When I learned how to sew when I was young, I keep referring back to my mom teaching me, but when I was a child and a teenager, my mom taught me how to sew. She always did the zipper in the middle of a seam, where you did a basting stitch the length of the zipper, and then you sewed the zipper in, and then you broke the basting stitches, and it was a centered zipper. I never learned how to do invisible zippers. I've tried following tutorials. I struggle with it, and I know a lot of people struggle with it, but I prefer to avoid zippers if I can. They're just very fiddly for me and very challenging for me, but practice would make perfect, so I need to try to do more of that. So what fasteners do you prefer, and what do you avoid? Do you avoid buttons and buttonholes? Do you avoid drawstrings? How do you feel about putting in grommets or things like that? Do you prefer sewing for yourself or sewing for others? Now, I don't like the words selfish sewing or selfless sewing, because for me, I guess it's all selfish because I enjoy it. I do it because I derive enjoyment from it, and I derive enjoyment from the act of sewing. So in the end, it's a toss-up between whether the garment is for me or for somebody else. For me, it's more a matter of how easy is the garment to put together, how quick is it, how much time is it going to involve. Now, when I make dresses for myself, they take longer to lay out, to cut out, to put the pieces together, to do the finishing on. It's going to take me several sessions of sewing to finish that one garment, whereas when I sew for others, when I make skirts or dresses for little dresses for Africa charity, those are very fast. It's 1 yard of fabric, a few seams, and it's done. So I tend to do those as a palette cleanser. So the sewing for others is more of a break in between the more involved sewing for myself. But either way, I get the pleasure of the sewing. Now, I don't make garments for people other than for charity very often. I've made my sister-in-law a couple of things. I made her a nightgown and I made her a sweatshirt. I've made my dad a cushion cover. So just a few odds and ends like that. But I don't have children, so I don't have that incentive or temptation to sew things for kids. Um, and I don't do a lot of home decor sewing like cushions or things like that. So it's mainly garments for myself or for others. And I guess I don't really have a big preference between those. It's the act of sewing itself that's fun for me. What do you think? When you're looking for sewing inspo, where do you find your inspiration? Is it more on YouTube or more on Instagram? I know some people will watch a lot of YouTube videos and don't even look at Instagram. Other people are primarily using Instagram and they are creating saved collections of things that they think they would like to try in the future. I use both. But mainly YouTube, just because I like the face-to-face aspect of it, the talking aspect of it, the seeing a live view of someone's garment that they've made, more so than on Instagram where it's still photos. But I like both. Where do you primarily go for your sewing inspiration? Is it one of these two media outlets or is it somewhere else? Do you prefer sewing dresses or separates? I guess we could say dresses and jumpsuits or separates. In other words, do you prefer sewing something that's like an all-in-one garment, or do you prefer doing, say, tops and skirts and pants where you can mix and match? For me, I tend to prefer dresses. I haven't made a jumpsuit yet, but I would like to. Because of my figure, I have a very straight up and down figure that's kind of thick in the middle. So I find that dresses are more slimming on me because they draw the eye up and down, whereas anything that cuts me in half in the middle emphasizes the thickness of my middle because I don't come in at the middle. So anything that has a belt or a top tucked into a bottom, I don't feel is flattering on me. So I'm not a big wearer of separates. If I do wear, say, a blouse and slacks, I make an over blouse, right? A blouse that is hip length, that is meant to be worn on the outside. Because again, I feel that that kind of draws the eye up and down a little more and doesn't cut me in half right at the middle. When you're short-waisted and thick in the middle, cutting yourself in half in the middle is not always a good look, at least for me. But what do you like? Do you prefer sewing all-in-one garments, or do you like to make separates that you can mix and match? How do you pass on or rehome old me makes? I've seen some people say they give them to the charity shop when they cull their wardrobe, just like they would any other garment. I hear other people say that their charity shop will not accept handmade garments. Some people pass them on to friends or relatives. Some people try to repurpose the fabric. So I'm curious what you do with those old me makes. You just put them in the back of the closet and hang on to them because you made it? What do you do? For me, again, it depends. With some of my older me makes, if they don't fit me, I will try to alter them to make them fit me or alter them into a different style so they fit me better. If there's a lot of fabric in them, I might try to repurpose it into a brand new garment. Again, with my charity sewing, I often will cut pocket bags out of an old garment because I just need cotton, like teardrop shapes for those sewn in side seam pockets. So I might cut up an old garment to make those pockets. I'm curious what you do with your old me makes. Do you prefer a quick make or an involved one? Now, based on what I've already said, I think you know I prefer a quick make, but I've heard a lot of people on YouTube say that they really enjoy sinking into a project, getting a more complicated pattern and figuring it out and sewing it over several or many sewing sessions. It's like a challenge. It's like a puzzle to put together. I don't like puzzles, and I sew for pleasure, so I don't always want to be challenged. I remember in the old days when I would go to the fabric store with my mom and we would look at pattern catalogs and things. We rarely picked out a Vogue pattern because in those days, I haven't used one in many years, so I don't know now, but in those days, a Vogue pattern was complicated. You know, you'd look at this dress and there were 27 pattern pieces and there were princess seams and there were welt pockets and all kinds of things going on. So generally we tried to avoid Vogue patterns. Simplicity always had, I think, like a Jiffy line of patterns or an easy to sew line. Simplicity and McCall's and Butterick are really the primary ones that we always bought. Those were in the days before New Look, and some of these Berta wasn't available at that time that I remember. So it's basically Simplicity, McCall's, Butterick, and Vogue when I was a kid, but we would avoid Vogue. I remember that. I am not someone who loves puzzles and long projects and having to figure things out and putting something aside till tomorrow when I can figure out how to fix a mistake or something like that. I usually prefer, like with tops, a front, a back, a sleeve, over the head. That's ideal for me. But some people take great pleasure in those more involved makes, so I'd like to know what you think. Are you a solitary sewist or a social one? Now, many of us are solitary sewists, not by choice. I live in Michigan, as you know, and around here there aren't that many sewing socials. I do believe one of our local fabric stores has one once a week, but I haven't gotten involved with that yet. But home sewing is not as common among my circle of acquaintance as it seems to be in other places. And I listen with great envy those of you in Britain who talk about going to sewing socials and having all these sewing friends. That looks like a wonderful time to me, although I probably wouldn't enjoy having to pack up my stuff and haul it someplace else to work on it. But I think it would be great fun to sew with other people, to try things on and help others fit their garments and things like that. Now, I know I could organize and host my own sewing social if I chose to. I know there are online sewing socials and I want to check those out a little more. Some of the online sewing socials that I'd like to check out, again, are in Britain, so the time difference can be a challenge there. So for the most part, I am a solitary sewist in the sense that I sew by myself. However, I usually have YouTube going while I'm sewing, and I'm watching your videos, and I am binging playlists on YouTube and things like that. So I will pull up a favorite YouTuber and just set it for, I think it's Play Mix. It's like a random selection of videos, and I don't care if I've seen them before. They're kind of background and they're kind of companionship for me. So if I follow you on YouTube and you notice that someone has been like watching your really old videos, it might be me because I'm watching them like from the beginning of your channel straight through for hours just because I'm using you for company as I'm sewing. But I'm curious, are you the type of person who wants to go into a sewing room and shut the door and have quiet or maybe just some music while you sew and be very concentrated in what you're doing? Or would you rather do your sewing in a room with someone else where you can chat? Or do you have to have the TV going? What is it that you do for companionship or not while you're sewing? Do you have a dedicated space for sewing? I don't, but I would very much like to. I do have a spare bedroom. It is full of boxes right now because when my mom passed away a couple years ago and we emptied out my parents' house and a lot of things went to charity, and then a lot of things my brother and I took. I had stored a lot of stuff at my parents' house over the years, so I had all these boxes that I finally had to deal with. All that stuff you say, I'll deal with it someday. Well, someday came, and I've been going through it slowly, but it's taking up space right now. But I would love to convert that spare bedroom into a sewing room. Now, I'm probably going to have to tackle that stuff sooner rather than later because I'm getting some remodeling done over the next few months. The first step is going to be the kitchen and bathrooms, so that's not so bad. I am going to have to, like empty my cupboards and move the dining table out of the dining room and move, like empty the bathroom drawers and cupboards and things like that because I'm getting new appliances, new flooring, new cupboards, new countertops, all that kind of stuff. So that's the first phase of the remodel. The next phase of the remodel is going to be carpeting, and that's going to involve, obviously, living room, hallway, and bedrooms, and having to move the furniture out of those places. And so by the time we get around to that, which will probably be later this year, I'm really going to have to deal with those boxes, either take them to storage or get rid of them or do something. So I have a lot of work ahead of me. Thankfully, as you know, I'm a university professor. I am teaching right now in our Summer 1 session, which ends next week. I'm not teaching in the Summer 2 session, which runs July through the end of August. So I will have those 2 months. I do have things I need to do work-wise during that time, but it's kind of at my own pace. So I do need to get that spare room cleaned out. Anyway, that's my problem, not yours. Long story short is I would like to convert that into a sewing room, or at least part of it into a sewing space during that process. Right now, I'm on a card table in the living room. I'm facing the television, sofa's behind me, just so I can watch TV while I sew. When and if I convert part of that spare room into a sewing space, I will want to set up my tablet in there or something so I can watch some videos while I'm sewing. But it would be nice to be able to close the door on things, because right now I've got this, it's a long card table, and I do my cutting on here. Then I set up my sewing machine and do my sewing here. I have to set up my ironing table here in the living room next to me. It would be nice to be able to leave the sewing machine and an ironing table, ironing board set up all the time, and to be able to pause a project and just shut the door on it and go back to it next time. Right now I have to get everything out and put everything away every time. So I would love to have a dedicated space for sewing. If you have a sewing room, I hope and imagine that you're grateful that you do. Even the tiniest sewing space is really nice to have, just so you can come and go from your projects. Do you have a dedicated space? If not, do you anticipate getting one? Let me know. How do you feel about labels in me makes? I know a lot of people will put a label in every garment they make. Other people avoid them. Some people find them irritating if they're at the back of the neck. I know people who cut the labels out of ready to wear because they don't like the feeling of it against their neck. Some people put labels on the outside or in the side seam of a garment. What do you do? I generally don't put labels in me-mades that I'm going to wear. I do put them in things that other people are going to wear because I have these labels that say handmade with love. So if I make something for someone else, I'll put one of those handmade with love labels in it. For me, I don't want or need or care about a label. There are a lot of cute labels out there. I really enjoyed watching people opening up their advent calendars during Vlogmas and showing the different labels that they got. I don't know if I would use that many of them if I had them, but I'm tempted. I'm tempted maybe in the upcoming holiday season to get an advent calendar or two after seeing people opening them during their Vlogmas, because a lot of people had advent calendars that had sewing gadgets or buttons and notions and labels and things like that. And they were so cute and tempting. So we'll see when the holiday season comes. But tell me, how do you feel about labels in me makes? Are they a necessity? Do you do them all the time? Do you do them only occasionally and only certain kinds of garments? What is your practice there? And now for my final question. When you look at your own wardrobe, what percentage is me made and what percentage is ready to wear? And what do you think would be ideal? Are you aiming for a high percentage of me made, 100% me made? Or is it 50-50? Or does it not matter to you? I wear both. I'm finding myself moving more and more toward me made now. We all know people who me make everything down to their underclothes and, everything. Maybe slips and bras and knit their own socks. I don't know. Some people aspire to that 100% me made. Others make an occasional thing. I have found I like to make dresses and tops, mostly dresses. And 100% dresses in my wardrobe wouldn't really work for my lifestyle. I wear dresses for work, for teaching, but not every day. I occasionally wear slacks and a nice top for work. And of course, I wear casual things at home. So I don't aspire to 100% me made. I don't aspire to make things like coats. Some people aspire to make the more complicated things like coats or tailored jackets and things like that because they really want that 100% me made wardrobe. That isn't me, but it might be you. So what would be your breakdown, your ideal percentage of me made and ready to wear? Are you aspiring toward a higher level of me mades in your wardrobe? I'd be curious to know. I hope you enjoyed hearing my answers to those 20 sewing questions. The list of questions will be in the description box below if you would like to try this video yourself. And I wish you a wonderful weekend and health, happiness, and prosperity in the coming week. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.